Hey everyone, Dr. Ashley here. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Feldman Physical Therapy and Performance YouTube channel. We're always grateful you're here. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about getting back at it. This spring is approaching fast, summer is coming even faster, and I'm sure that many of us are feeling that itch to hit the ground running. Get back on the roads, get back on the trails, and train for that upcoming race. We're ready for that ready, set, go type of mindset where we're ready to challenge ourselves. But the one thing we have to remember, you can't just jump to the finish line. You need to make sure that you do this in a way that you're not going to get injured. And most of the time, if you're a new runner or even an old runner, you need to make sure that you train slowly but steadily, because what does that let us do? Win the race. So what I want you guys to do, make sure you stay tuned to the end of this, because I'm going to give you some of the top things that I look for, whether I'm creating a training program for somebody or whether I'm giving someone advice themselves to look for to make sure that you are not overtraining or putting yourself in harm's way. We don't want you to end up with niggles, those little things that come up over time, or these running related injuries we see all so often. Well, guys, thanks as always for tuning in. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe below, but let's get started. So let's chat a little bit about the 10% rule. This is something I love to discuss with my running athletes because a lot of people don't know about it, but it is such a staple idea in the running world as to how to help athletes prevent running injuries over time. So what the heck is this thing? Basically, what I discuss with runners is that you should not increase your weekly mileage by more than 10% of the week before. So if you're running 10 miles a week, your next week that you're running shouldn't be more than 11 miles. So basically thinking about keeping mileage fairly consistent and adding a little bit at a time. The reason behind this, science actually does tell us that this is a way to help you prevent injuries over time. Now, I will say for some veteran runners, obviously increasing at a little bit more than 10% is okay if you're not dealing with injury. I say no more than 20% a week is really what we're shooting for. And remember, I said veterans, not for you newbies. The big thing with running is a repetitive sport. So we need to remember that, and we need to do it in a way that our bodies aren't going to break down. So what are some other things that we can chat about? There are 3 things that I always throw out to my runners: frequency, duration, and intensity. These go right along with that 10% rule. The first thing, if you are a runner new to running, I always say you want to make sure that you are able to walk for at least 45 minutes at a really brisk pace before you start that trotting. And the reason being is our bodies need to be prepared. But let's talk a little bit more about those 3 variables that I just said: frequency, duration, and intensity. So say you're somebody who's getting into running and you just want to start and you want to go run miles upon miles. Well, that's not what we always want you to do. The first thing you should always think about increasing is how often you're running. So if first you start running one day, the next thing you're going to do is run 2 days, and the next thing you're going to do is basically run 3 days, all right? But you have to think about your mileage systematically in that 10% rule fashion. Okay, the next thing we think about is that duration. So how long or how far you're running. Some people love to run by minutes, some people love to run by miles, and that's where duration comes into play. If you are running, say, that 10 miles a week, you have to remember you can't just jump to 15 miles like that. Maybe if you're a seasoned runner, but not anyone else. We want to make sure your body's prepared for what you're throwing at it. And sometimes adding 5 more miles into your week can put you back quite a bit of time. The last thing we add in is intensity. So how hard your runs are. You don't always have to run hard to get faster. And that's proven by the 80-20 rule that we talk about often. So basically 80% of your running should be done at an easy effort, and then 20% should be done of higher intensity efforts, and maybe not right off the bat. That's why we say intensity should be the last thing to increase. So if you're running, say, 3 days a week or 5 days a week, right? What we're looking really for is that, say, 3 of those days are of an easy intensity effort, an aerobic effort. You're building your base. The other 2 days are going to be a little bit of a higher intensity effort. What does that mean? You may add in some hills to your training. You may add in some track work to your training, or you may just pick up the pace a little bit as you're running. Those all count as increasing the intensity, and that's something to remember. The thing is you can't do all of these 3 things at once, just like you can't increase more than that 10% or say 20%, depending, as I said, a week if you don't want to get injured. And I want you to remember those facts. The last thing I like to talk about is strength training. And the reason I do is because so many runners come into the clinic and they talk to me about strength training. They say, "Ooh, I hate it. That's why I run." But the big thing is that when you run, you need the capacity to basically put up with what you're throwing at your body. So you're taking the same step over and over and over again. That's why we see things like Achilles tendinopathies or hamstring tendinopathies. We see these lateral hip pains. Some people say this IT band syndrome. Those things all pop up because we are repeating the same motions over and over again. But how can we make those muscles more resilient? By adding in, say, 2 to 3 days a week of strengthening. And strengthening doesn't always mean go high intensity. It doesn't mean plyometrics. It doesn't mean jumps. It means you need to get stronger. You need to move some weight or do some body work activity that's really going to stress the areas that you need to work on as a runner. And this is something that I can address in upcoming posts, upcoming YouTube videos, where we talk a little bit more about strength training and preventing injuries for running. It's something that I stress, as you can see, but also the other variables above are extremely important too, so you can't forget those. So guys, if you have any questions about any of the information in this post, please don't hesitate to ask. There's so much more that goes into not getting injured as a runner, and this is just scratching the surface. But these are things, if you are a novice runner, put them in the back of your head, remember them, and don't forget your strength training.